So we'll see what happens. But what we will see is a gentleman standing outside an apartment door. It looks like he's being filmed like through one of those old keyhole spy things, the little glass things in the door. But obviously it's recorded. I assume it's some Ring type camera. And he's knocking on the door. He's wearing a blue bandana around his head. He's dressed as if he were a maintenance worker. And he's pretending to be a maintenance worker. He wants to come into the apartment, he says, because they need to change the filters, I guess, in the HVAC system. There is someone inside the apartment conversing through the door, the closed door. There actually turns out there's two people inside, but at least one person's conversing through the closed door and appears to be disinterested in allowing this dude into his apartment. And when the fake maintenance worker gets that news, he pretends to be polite, but pretty quickly he starts kicking at the door. Not behavior consistent with a maintenance worker, is it? And it turns out that he's got a masked buddy in a red shirt who also starts kicking at the door. And they're pretty strenuous about it. I mean, they're trying to get this door open. So it would be nice to know what kind of door security this dude had, because most doors, especially, I mean, most of us have lived in these kinds of apartments at some time in our life. They're not that hard to open up. And these dudes are really struggling, and they never really do get the door opened up. By the way, there are ways to augment those doors. Remember, the whole purpose of a door is not to be impervious to entry. Give someone enough time, they're coming in. It's to slow them down long enough to get to your defensive measures so you're able to deal with that problem. And this door certainly served that purpose effectively. At some point, however, the apartment dweller decided he'd had enough. He wasn't going to wait for the door to get kicked open. The door was still closed, presumably locked, and the apartment dweller starts firing rounds through the door into the common space of the apartment building, and there's another apartment right across that corridor. And you can see the rounds start hitting the wall on the other side of the corridor. And then the video continues and the police show up. We'll watch that part too, but really for use of force purposes, everything's pretty much ends there, although I do have some comments on the police interaction as well. So with that all framed out, let's go ahead and watch the video, and then we'll dive into some of the legal issues. So let me hop over here. Let's see, maybe this would be better. Whoops, that's not at all what I wanted. All right, here we go. So this is the head of the fake maintenance worker right here. And again, I don't believe anybody was even struck by a bullet. So there's no gore, there's no blood, there's no injury here. Hear me, YouTube? Nobody was even hurt, except for the far wall. And that's the other apartment, presumably innocent bystanders, right? The other apartment across the corridor there that is downrange of the rounds being fired by the apartment dweller. So here we go.
No. Yeah, we're checking the air filters. Oh, much appreciated.
Much appreciated. Still pretending to be a maintenance guy, just wants a running start at the door. Bam! Here's his buddy. Gloves and a mask. They're trying. That's a lot of rounds across that corridor.
Dallas police. Yeah. Mr. Rodriguez, Ethan, it's Dallas police.
All right, so let's go back to the use of force. I will cover the police stuff too. A few things we know here. So, of course, we have a variety of justifications for the use of deadly defensive force. This was clearly the use of deadly defensive force, right? The firing of rounds intended to strike an aggressor. We have self-defense, independent of being in a dwelling, right? Just self-defense. What's the justification of self-defense? It's the 5 elements of self-defense: innocence, imminence, proportionality, avoidance, and reasonableness. Innocence, are you the innocent party? Is the other party the unlawful aggressor in the fight? Imminence is the threat you're defending yourself, either in progress or immediately about to happen. Did I want to say anything more about that? Proportionality is the degree of threat you're facing only non-deadly force threat, in which case only non-deadly force can be used, or is it a deadly force threat, in which case deadly force can be used? Avoidance, do you have a legal duty to retreat? This happened in Texas. Texas not only has no generalized legal duty to retreat, it's a stand your ground state. It's a hard stand your ground state. The jury's not instructed. They're not even allowed to consider the possibility of retreat in evaluating the reasonableness of your use of force in self-defense. So avoidance is completely off the table in Texas in an otherwise lawful case of self-defense. And reasonableness, were you reasonably perceiving what was going on? And in the context of reasonableness, this video is very helpful. And there would also be a defense of others defense, because there is a second person inside the apartment. So the person who fired the rounds could argue, I wasn't just defending myself, self-defense, I also have a defense of others justification. It's probably not the strongest justification, though. Probably the stronger justification would be defense of dwelling, defense of habitation, because you could argue that some of the elements here for self-defense have not yet been satisfied. At the very least, it's ambiguous. Clearly, innocence is satisfied. Someone's trying to force their way into your apartment, right? You're the innocent party there. They're the unlawful aggressor. But what about imminence? Are they an imminent threat when they're still on the other side of a secure, unbroken, locked door? Or is imminence not achieved until they've actually broken the door, or at least begun to break the door, right? The door being broken is about to happen. It's ambiguous. You could make an argument either way there. What about proportionality? Are you facing a deadly force threat? Well, maybe. I mean, two aggressors, right? But there's two people inside the apartment too. So there's no disparity of numbers. I haven't seen any weapons displayed. And you can't just speculate that there's weapons. So there's room to argue on proportionality as well, if we're talking straight up self-defense, defense of others, independent of the whole dwelling situation here. Again, avoidance is off the table. Reasonableness, I mean, you're reasonably perceiving someone trying to break in your house as supported by the camera footage. But are you reasonably perceiving imminence and reasonably perceiving proportionality, a deadly force threat? Those are things an aggressive prosecutor would argue. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about any ambiguity in the defense of self or defense of others. Oh, by the way, you can get this Elements of Self-Defense cheat sheet, folks, for free. We make this available for free. lawofselfdefense.com/elements. It's just a PDF download. We don't ask a penny for it. If you don't understand these 5 elements of self-defense, you certainly can't understand use of force law at all. If you do nothing else, I mean, just get the free download. lawofselfdefense.com/elements. But fortunately, we don't have to rely solely on those 5 elements, because we have another justification because of the context of the dwelling, of the castle, of the habitation. Most states provide an additional justification similar to, but independent of, duplicative of self-defense and defense of others, independent of defense of persons. They provide additional privilege for the use of deadly defensive force in the context of your home. Sometimes also your place of business, sometimes also your occupied vehicle. Why? Well, because your home is your castle. Your home is serving the function of providing a place of shelter and protection for you. Even in states that normally have a generalized legal duty to retreat, for example, before you can use deadly force in self-defense, every one of them relieves you of that duty if you're defending yourself from an intruder attempting to or in your home. The whole point of a legal duty to retreat is the theory that you would have a safer place to go if you retreated, that you could achieve safety without having to fight. You could achieve safety by simply withdrawing from the conflict. But if you're already in your home, what's the safer place than your home? Your home is supposed to be your ultimate refuge of safety. So even Massachusetts relieves you of your otherwise existing legal duty to retreat if you're defending yourself against a intruder in your home. So this happened in Texas, in Dallas, and of course, Texas, like other states, also has these kinds of legal provisions that give you a special privilege for the use of force in self-defense in the context of defending your habitation against an intruder. And Texas does it the way most states do it. They do it better, but generally speaking, they do it the way most states do it. And by that, I mean, they create a legal presumption that you had a reasonable fear of imminent deadly force harm at the hands of this intruder. Simple enough, right? But if you think about what I just said, that legal presumption is giving you really all the elements you need for a lawful use of deadly defensive force. The jury's being told these elements are presumed to exist. So it creates a legal presumption that you had a reasonable fear of imminent deadly force harm. Well, the legal presumption is that you had a reasonable fear of imminent deadly force harm. That's 3 of the 5 elements of self-defense right there. 3 of the 5 elements you need to justify your use of deadly defensive force. Of course, avoidance is off the table in Texas. As I said, it's a hard stand your ground state. But even if this were Massachusetts, you wouldn't have the element of avoidance because you're defending in your castle. The castle doctrine would relieve you of any element of avoidance. And of course, innocence, the last element, is kind of baked in the cake when you're lawfully in your home and you're dealing with someone unlawfully and forcibly trying to intrude in your home. So this legal presumption is very powerful. Essentially, it gives you a blanket justification for the use of deadly defensive force if you meet the conditions of the statute and you don't trigger any of the exceptions or exclusions from the legal presumption. Now, I'll tell you up front, if you do trigger one of the exclusions from the legal presumption, what you've lost is the legal presumption of these elements. You still get to argue standard self-defense and standard defense of others. You haven't lost your privilege to use force in defense against these intruders. You just have lost the benefit of the legal presumption. The jury wouldn't be told that they are to legally presume that these elements are present.